Hey there, Titans. In this video, we'll talk about the interactive word ignore validation on preview and force validation on submit. We'll be using the Titan worded in and the Titan form builder. All right, so we have a simple form here with two text boxes. I labeled them first name, last name, and two checkboxes. And we'll map them into our word as dynamic interactive fields. And we will review the ignore validation on preview and force validation on submit. All right, so I have a very simple document here. I'm just bringing in the account name from the account object, and some interactive fields. Let's add our checkbox 2. All right, and let's insert interactive field, and I'll grab it directly from my form and checkbox 2. Oh, great. I didn't say any of them as mandatory, just as it is. I'll publish it to an existing form. And great. All right, let's take a look at our document settings here. So word mapping, configure, and we have enabled the word mapping. We mapped it to the record ID. We checked the preview before submit, auto preview, so it will come up automatically, and the signature interactive is enabled as well. Wonderful. Now we see the force validation on submit and ignore validation on preview. I'm not touching them right now. Let's just see how this behaves. So this guy is FLD8, and we'll grab an ID from Salesforce, and let's publish it. Let's pass in the FLD8, so we'll get it with the value from Salesforce. And here is our interactive document loaded. Everything is fine. But what happens, and while this loads, I'm just going to head over here and say, this is mandatory, and I'll say the last name, let's add a value rule saying it has to contain ABC, and we'll write a message, last name must contain ABC. Let's hit apply, and for the checkbox we'll do also a value rule saying if it's not equal to checkbox 2, then it's valid, which means that one of them has to be checked. So we can say at least one checkbox has to be checked. Great. We'll hit apply. And this is our interactive document from before. And we save the document. We save the form. Let's refresh and see what happens. All right, so it's loading. Now it's going to try and pop up the preview. And we're getting the correction since the form is invalid. The first name is a mandatory, last name must contain ABC, and both checkboxes are unchecked. So in order for us to bring up the preview, even though that the fields on the form currently are not matching the rules, we will click the ignore validations on preview. And now once I refresh this, and here's our document, we can see immediately that we need to fill up the first name, and if I will try and submit now, so last name must contain ABC, and at least one checkbox has to be checked. So let's put this with ABC, and let's check checkbox number 1, and I'll hit continue, then hit submit. Wonderful. Now the force validation on submit, I'll leave this unchecked, and let's create a scenario for this. So let's say you have any fields that are off the form. So the form itself, the dynamic interactive form, doesn't catch the validation. So let's say you'd have some fields on the form, and then in the form itself you will do some calculations on them, etc. So whatever is not off the form, is not on the actual Word document, the interactive document, then once you skip the validations, on the preview, then once you try and submit, they're not going to be recalculated unless we check the force calculation. So let's do on the numeric a value rule, and purposely I'm not mapping out to the form, I just want it to run in the background. And I'll say if it's only valid if it's less than 100. Numeric be less than 100. And I'll hit apply and save, and purposely I'm not hiding it. You would normally hide it because you don't want to show anything but the form, but the interactive document. And let's map this from Salesforce. So I'm gonna head over to Salesforce integration, set get, and we'll map it from the account. Our condition is very simple, account ID equals record ID, and we'll map the numeric to, let's say, annual revenue. All right, so our annual revenue on the account that we're mapping to the form is 105. Let's refresh this guy. And we saw that for a split second that it's 105, and it's still and the validation rule kicked in, and we wouldn't be able to submit it. But now, since we skipped the validation, then it's being ignored. So if I'll do this and I'll fill up everything that the dynamic document wants, it will submit the form even though that the validation rule is on. But if we'll go back here and document generation, word mapping, and now I'll force validation on submit, what will happen now, and I'll refresh this, so the preview comes up, and just imagine this scenario doesn't make any sense, but usually you would have elements on the form itself that you're mapping from the whatever the user types in the dynamic document. All right, so we'll fill this in, and we'll do ABC, and we'll take one of these guys, and now we see that we cannot submit the form since there is something in the background that the validation rule kicked in. All right, so let's just preview this one last time. We'll do this to 99, and we'll hit save, and we'll get back here and refresh. And now everything will go through since the validations, we don't have any problems with any of the validations. I'll fill this in, ABC, and there we have it. And this is how it's done.